Our next laboratory exercise is going to focus on how to encapsulate these tiny little details and low-level computations into a helpful C++ class which would represent individual models. So the idea is, again, to add new C++ class to our application to allow us to draw multiple models for the sky, for the terrain, all sorts of objects in our world, and make things easier as opposed to basically like copying and pasting something like this and making adjustments. And so it's not very practical to keep something like in the array. We need to be able to load our models from a file with all this information already pre-configured. So there are many responsibilities of this new class model that we're going to add to our laboratory, to our project in this next laboratory exercise. But before we start our work, I would like to show you that every time you are done with the project, I just recommend that you go to Build and click Clean Solution. So this is still loading our example project, so I'm just going to Clean Solution. So this actually removes all the generated executables, and that preserves some space on your hard drive. And then I call File, Close Solution. So the solution is now detached from our Visual Studio environment, and now I typically go back to our to the project, and here I've been using this example lecture 6 buffers, and during the build, Visual Studio generates these folders for intermediate files generated during the build. So I normally remove the .vas and debug, and if you're not seeing .vas, you can go to View and Display Hidden Items. So hidden item is basically the directory or file which has the hidden attribute turned on. So if you turn this on, you'll be able to see VS, and that may be a large subfolder which can be automatically regenerated. So I normally just delete these two. I select them, and you can right click and say delete, or what I'm about to do is to press Shift Delete on my keyboard, and this will allow me permanently delete these two without being copied over to the recycle bin. But be careful when you delete something. So .vs debug and .vs release would be those that will save you space. So delete these, and now this entire project directory is ready for archiving, so I can go to my zip utility. For instance, here I'm using open source 7-zip, and just add to whatever file I like, 7z format or zip, and that's the idea. Just remember that this is how you can preserve copies of your projects, copies of your work, and be able to reuse them in the future. But remember that the first step was to build and clean the solution. So let's get started with this handout. And part of our example was this discussion about these fragments and how our fragments connect to the data that we can supply in our client program. So I'm just going to jump directly to the part where we're getting started with this laboratory. So again, our entire project configuration under GL262 lab, this zip file that contains the starting point, the prototype of our laboratory here, supposed to be extracted in under labs in this area. So I'm just going to right click and say save link as, and it's already pointing to this place, but you know, if it's not on your computer, you copy it from here. You can paste this in this box and hit enter, which takes you to this place, and save. Okay, so once this gets saved, and once it's all done, you can just right click, and with 7-zip is just extract here is the best option, and it extracts into its own folder. Once this is all done, I normally remove the zip file. So again, Shift Delete will allow me to permanently delete this folder without, it's actually not a folder, it's a zip file, but it's kind of crazy terminology right here telling me that this is a folder. This must be really confusing to the users who don't know the difference between the zip file and the folder. So anyways, we're going to delete this zip file and say yes. Okay, so so the instructions are to actually load this and build. All right, File, Open Project, and we're now going to scroll to our labs, lab 3, and open this solution file. Again, there is a prompt to upgrade to the current version of our compiler, which I'm going to OK, and that seems to be working fine. We'll try building this now. Build. Okay, and so everything seems to be doing fine. There are no errors as a result, and we're ready to get started with the rest of this laboratory.